No one changes software for fun. No one does it. It's so much work. So if you're going to do it, then this is why I think consulting makes a lot of sense, and maybe biased, right? But what I'm seeing is you can, because I've seen this for years, you can switch software and not standardize. You can have the exact same software. You can even have multi-clinic software in every location, and everybody uses it differently. And you didn't actually get consistent data. You can't still run consolidated reports.
Welcome back to the Dental Economist Show with me, Mike Huffaker. Before we get started, if you enjoy the show, please like, follow, leave a review wherever you prefer to listen. Today, we're excited to welcome Jill Nesbitt, a seasoned expert in dental consulting and practice management. Jill is the founder of Optimized Dental Consulting, where she helps dental practices optimize their operations through tailored consulting services. With over 20 years of experience working with multi-location and multi-specialty dental groups, Jill brings a wealth of knowledge to her clients, advising them on everything from technology implementation to operational efficiency. Jill, really glad to have you on the show today. How are you doing?
Fantastic. Thanks for the fantastic introduction as well. Feel free and follow me around and give that introduction every time that I'm meeting someone new.
Yeah, not a problem. I'll just follow you about 3 steps behind, and actually be like one of those heralds that they used to have in the olden days with, the horn. And just whenever you enter a room, I'll read it out loud for you.
I'm sure that will not be inconvenient for your life in any way, shape, or form. I appreciate that.
Not at all. Not at all. I'm very free. Lots of free time. So, hey, I'd love, getting started here. I was looking back through kind of your LinkedIn, doing a little stalking and seeing kind of all the history. And of course, I've heard you speak multiple times. You've spoken at some of our events as well. So I know a bit of your history and kind of growing up and your dad being a dentist. But you don't just talk the talk, but you've also walked the walk and been a real operator in a dental environment. Can you share a little bit about your background, kind of where you've come from and how you even got into dental in the first place?
Yeah. I mean, logically, I studied Spanish in college. So that's clearly a direct connection to getting into dental practice management and eventually software technology, right? Yeah, I had the incredible opportunity to work with my family. My father was an early visionary of multi-doctor practice. He brought in specialists into our small town Ohio practice early on, 1980s. And I joined his group in 1997, and I actually worked for my parents for better than 15 years managing that practice. At our height, we had 7 doctors. I had 3 GPs in every specialty. And that was really foundational to my really learning dentistry and being held to a very high standard by my traditional generation father. So after I I'll pause there, but it was fantastic and I loved it. And so I come at dentistry. I think this is worth noting. Like I come at dentistry because in small town Ohio, like all of the team members that work for us were in my community. And all the patients that came to us were like the teachers and the friends and like all of our community. At our height, we actually had more patients in the practice than we had citizens in our town.
So what ultimately led you to joining the family business when you were studying Spanish and kind of maybe pursuing different goals at that point?
I was actually already studying for my MBA. I was married and living a little bit further south from where the practice of my family was. And I was working for a small environmental company, and I was on the regular having dinners with my folks whose practice was exploding at that time. And I was working actually for a similar sized company, even though actually that was an international firm. I was trying to use my language early on. Anyway, we were having dinner every couple weeks or so, and we found that as 2 small, rapidly growing businesses, we were having the exact same conversation. We were talking about marketing and HR and organizational structure and technology and all of these things. And here I was going to school, at night for that. And so after not very long, they're like, what would be fantastic? Why don't you come join the practice and help us build out the business structure here? We'll give you flexibility and time to study, which my other full-time job doesn't really offer. And we agreed I would just do that for a few years until I got my degree. Well, funny how things worked. After I got my degree, what I realized from all my friends in school is that they only got to study one piece of it. They got a job in marketing or in logistics or in one piece. Whereas I'd walk out of class and we'd say, all right, class was on org behaviors day. Let's talk about how we're doing things. And my dad was immediately like, awesome. And we would talk about it. We would have lunch. We would talk about it. And then we would implement it in the afternoon. And so it's just, there's nothing more fun than really working on your small business. And after getting a taste of like really having the opportunity to dig in and do anything we wanted. Now, I say anything. It was clearly up to my father, what actually got done, but it was so much fun. And so I was like, this is fantastic. And so I got my degree. He gave me a nice raise and I stayed, and poof, there went 15 years.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you got to learn different theories, learn different approaches, then turn them into reality and actually have the ability to do that and see what it would look like when implemented and what the outcomes were. So you were there for 15 years and you transitioned then into technology implementations with Henry Schein One. What was the impetus for deciding to make that change? How did you come to the conclusion that was the new path, kind of maybe the little bit of a pivot, still same industry, but a different focus that you were going to pursue?
So actually my focus was consulting. I eventually moved down to Nashville, wanted a little bit bigger city, a little more fun, a little warmer than Ohio. And anyway, so I started doing some consulting, and pretty quickly I was working with these multi-location groups. So I had a couple 4-location group clients, and pretty quickly they were saying, and this is 15 years ago now, 10 plus, they were saying, okay, I can't trade my hygienist between locations because they don't know the software. I can't get consolidated reporting. You're the consultant. What software should we use? I'm thinking, man, that is a great question. I looked around, and again, 15 years ago, saw that Schein had an early attempt at cloud-based software. And I had a friend that was actually running a DSO and was an early adopter of that software. And so I thought, I got to find a solution. So I took the job with him, did integrations, really learned, all right, what does it look like to work with cloud-based software? And found pretty quickly it was bumpy and ugly at the early days of cloud, but it was still so much better than the shared Google documents I'd been creating with my clients. And so I'm like, all right, I did that for a pretty short period of time, less than a couple of years. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to go back and do consulting. Now I know this is how we could do this. Well, little did I know, I was actually working for Schein's largest customer. And so they offered me, they're like, no, we don't want you to go independent. We want to create a role. And so that's how I had the opportunity to, frankly, build out customer success for Schein's cloud-based system. And that also, in large fashion, gave me the opportunity to get foot in the door with dozens of, the major players. So I kind of leveled up from working with smaller, I shouldn't say leveled up, but just broadened my experience, right? From multi-doctor groups, multi-locations, small groups. And then I got to see, what are the big boys doing? And that really, over the last then 5.5 years there, gave me such incredible insight into what does it look like to design enterprise class centralization, standardization, workflows, all those things. But I'll pause there because I have a feeling you're going to give me the next leading question.
No, yes. Well, that actually explains a lot, because when I look at your background, one of the things that struck me was that you've always been entrepreneurial. Like you've always had different consulting roles that you were doing, or different businesses that you were launching, kind of in conjunction with what you did with the family business. And so there's kind of always been this at least desire, is what it appears to be based off your background, to launch out on your own. And so that kind of leads us to where we are today. So you spent the 5 years with HS1. You built out this customer success function, this implementation function for enterprise cloud software. When did you know it was time to go and to launch on your own? And what was the thought process that kind of got you to make that decision? So, which I know can always be scary. Maybe less so for you because you had so much experience doing it previously, but walk us through a little bit about how you thought about that.
Well, first, I was really successful and that was really fun. And after I delivered kind of a first national account, um, I thought that was great. I didn't necessarily want to do it again. I really like doing new things, right? But what I also found was I kept seeing a situation where I'd have two different clients that were, from the outside looking in exactly the same, similar model of practice, similar number of locations. One would despise the software, just hated it, thought it was garbage. The other was like, this is the greatest thing. I just love you and working with this, and it's so wonderful. And I'm like, what am I missing? And that happened more than once. And so I kept thinking, there's a gap here. And what I decided was, I think there's a gap in the marketplace, specifically around it's not necessarily the software. I'm a huge fan of good software, obviously, but what I am finding is it matters how that you implement it well. And so I wanted to and started a company specifically to do a very niche service, which is implement dental software successfully, because I'm not finding that is a service that's generally available. And Mike, I could not be more fortunate with the timing of all of this as we're watching interest rates and all of the things going on, that all of a sudden this last year and change that people are suddenly now interested in, how do I actually standardize my software, when for years we just bought practices and kind of let them grow and do their own thing. But now I'm really loving that people want to run a good practice, to run a good multi-location group. And to do that, my experiences, because I am not clinical, and in fact, I have this terrible inherited, gift of I faint with needles, like not my scene at all. So, but if I really want to run a good practice and I really want to partner with my owner doctor, well, then what that means is let's get the software right, because that's where the full workflow comes from. So that's what I'm doing now. And I'm absolutely loving it. I've been doing it for 2.5 years.
That's fantastic. There really is a gap in the market for that service. And you're right, there's a ton of tailwinds right now that are affecting people's desire to standardize under a single solution. Value creation is no longer the acquisition of office after office after office without instilling operational rigor and processes and systems. It now requires you to do that in order to actually get the value and extract it. And standardization of software platforms is a big piece of that. Now, when you talk about, look, these two different groups, one of them hates the software, one of them's like, this is the best thing ever. And when I think about the kind of implementation motion, there's so much that a software vendor can do themselves. But what you're doing in many ways is acting like an internal resource for that organization in a way that the software vendor actually can't. So that you're then bridging the gap between kind of the goals and desires of the executive leadership combined with collaboration with the vendors that are looking to implement the software to create a successful outcome. Would that be a kind of a good way of describing kind of the focus of what you're working on?
It's perfect. Like there are things, because I had this job, I worked for the software vendor, and I know no matter what, at the end of the day, the customer would still look at me and say, well, you're still working for the software vendor, so your opinion might be biased. Your recommendation is likely influenced, all those things, even though I'm like, this is just me. Like I work with you all the time. And so I found some of that. I also found some of the gaps in that they're only going to let me in so far because I don't work for them, right? So what I'm loving, so a couple of different things that I'm loving about this is, first of all, I can really fill in, and I have a team now too. It's not just me, but we can fill in that gap. And because we are directly working for the group practice or for that DSO, our allegiance and our support and our advocacy is very clear that you are paying us, we are working for you. But the nice partnership back with the software vendor is that I've been in your shoes. I know exactly that we have complete alignment on what we see as successful outcomes. And so I know that your success is my success, is the client's success. And so that's a perfect fit for how I can fit in. And I have the bandwidth and the time and the expertise to fill in where those gaps are. And that's also at a moment where, frankly, our friends in dentistry, they're short-staffed, and they're running a million miles an hour. A quick story. I just got a new client actually this morning, and it's a private equity backed firm that was part of the due diligence evaluating should they work with my company, et cetera. But I found it interesting when I was talking to them, the private equity woman said, because I said, what are your concerns? What are your thoughts about bringing us in? She said, Jill, there's 5 people at the support level for this DSO. There's 5 of them. We just don't have the bandwidth to get this done. That's why we're seriously looking at you. And I think that's probably a pretty common story, that people look at a DSO or they look at a multi-location group and they know they have, sea of everything. But do they have somebody that really, if you pull them off their full-time role, can actually get this done? And even if they could, have they done it over 9 years for hundreds of locations and probably know some other friends that they could tap into and figure out workarounds or gaps for their specific tech stack? So it's just kind of a unique service that is a mountain of work, but I seem to have a team that really loves it.
Yeah, it's been really fun to watch the growth of yourself and your organization. I think you spoke first at our Ignite Summit, I think 2 years ago, and that was shortly after you had launched. And at that time, it was you. And now you do have an entire team. You're really kind of establishing yourself as the premier solutions provider for technology implementations in the DSO space. So it's been great to watch. I think when I look at this industry as a whole, you mentioned like, hey, this didn't really exist before, which sounds ridiculous. You'd be like, how does this not exist? Because you look at other verticals and, let's just talk about, you want to buy Salesforce and implement Salesforce. Salesforce sells it to you. And then they're like, you find somebody to implement this. Like, we don't want to have anything to do with this anymore. And it's an entire cottage industry. There's dozens, hundreds of companies that are supporting and building really strong businesses kind of on the back of implementing these complex technology solutions in other verticals. Dental never really had an enterprise solution that, it was not thought of as something that was needed. All of these practice management tools that were softwares that were initially built were built for solo practices, because that's what the industry was. It was independent practices, not affiliated with larger groups. It's the same thing that comes up when I'm talking to other CROs and VPs of sales for different technology software companies. They're like, I'm looking for really great enterprise software sales in dental. And I was like, you know who those are? Those are the founders of technology companies, because there was no enterprise sales for software before. You had enterprise sales for supplies, like large group sales, but it just didn't exist. So it's neat to kind of be part of a category creation that didn't exist previously. But I digress. So question for you to get maybe a little controversial. We work with a lot of groups. You work with a lot of groups. You've worked with a lot of groups for many years. Not all groups are created equal. We know this. Leadership matters, like it always does in any business. When you're having conversations with people, have you gotten to the point yet where you'll have a conversation with a group and say, like, this will not be successful because you know that they don't have the will, or that they don't have maybe the talent at the top, or they have not put the internal infrastructure, or it is just not a priority and they're going to maybe try to put all the responsibility on you, when you know that it still requires a desire and internal buy-in to make this successful?
So I am getting far better at sort of standing my ground, shall we say. And with I'm adding, like I said, I'm excited about a new client and I'm adding a new team member also. And because of that, I've actually spent a little bit of time over the last couple of months even putting together kind of a next layer of, once we get a client, what does the kickoff look like, and getting very clear about all the resources. But that has actually been part of the initial conversations. And I'm doing a better job, I think, of having that discussion even before any contracts are signed. So, because it's not just like you'd almost think, and honestly, it's crazy how much effort this practice transition actually takes, or this software migration project. Because you think, okay, I've done my job. I found a consultant where we really don't have, that's not a major industry in our world yet. I found someone, they're going to do all the work and we're all good. And then I have to turn around also and say, not only do you need to hire me, we need to really sit down and have a conversation about training resources. most groups that are hiring us, they are still small enough that they don't have necessarily an internal training resource, or they might probably hit her up to like try and lead the whole thing, right? So they don't actually have that. So we talk about, how do we get that? How do we source back with the software vendor? And how do we then convert that over into internal resources? So like, what does that look like? Because that's a plan that is absolutely required. Secondly, we talk about RCM resources. It is absolutely required. I learned pretty quickly on my very first client a couple of years ago. They said, oh yes, we're hiring an RCM director. I'm like, great. And then they didn't. And I ended up not only managing a go live for 20 locations, but I was managing fee schedule. Like, it was ridiculous. And that's not what I love or want to do. And B, that was a gap. Like, and then I got a little bit caught, right? But, and that in the end, it's the group itself struggled. So now I also will again think about what's going on, and let me help you understand how a software implementation impacts your revenue cycle and what that looks like. We don't convert insurance. We're not converting AR. Like, let's talk about what that can be and what that looks like, et cetera. So the revenue cycle. And third piece, of course, they got to have an IT resource, and they got to have somebody they trust. There's a ton of lightning that person can do. They can take some of the lift off of the office team if I have the right team members from IT that can help me. And I think the other piece under RCM is, I'm also talking about, look, when you understand what it looks like, you have this beautiful, clean software. How are we going to create the carriers and the plans and the fee schedules? How do we actually really set that up well? I can do structurally. My team is going to do a lot of the leadership overall, but to fill in every single carrier, all the detail, we may need even to have some resources around a third party just to help us get that set up, right? So and when you start having those conversations, people kind of take a little step back and like, whoa, this is bigger than I realized. And that's when we can talk about, that's why I'm here. Like, we've been doing this and I want you to be successful, and I want you to understand what this is going to actually look like. And we can talk about that in advance, because to your point, Mike, if I just say, oh, sure, we'll just do it, it'll be fine, it may not be fine. So yeah, I'm getting better, but I haven't had to like point blank tell someone like, you don't have the plan, because they also come to a consultant saying, help me put together what the plan needs to look like. And so hopefully we're evolving to what that plan is that I think makes sense, and then can price appropriately, and then let's do it.
Yeah. Yeah. This actually made me think a little bit. I did a podcast episode with the co-founders of Aereo Dental, and they were talking about skill versus will. And in this particular case, they may not have the skill for it, which is why they come to you, but they have to have the will. There has to be the desire to complete the project. And how do you navigate through the inevitable bumps in the road? Because it is, well, I don't know, from my experience, very rare to have complete smooth sailing from the outset through a 20, 50, 200, 300 location implementation. There are always the moments, I think we can all think of the moments where something goes wrong. It's a conversion, or it's a training issue, or an office, they open for the first time on the new software. People don't know how to use it. They're using it wrong. They panic. The instinct in those moments is to pull back, stop, and say like, nope, this is a bad idea. For many of the groups, like, because it's scary. It's their business. They need to see patients. They need to be driving production. They need to stay in business. It's the intersection of profit and purpose. We get all that. How do you navigate through those moments?
So actually, one of the things that I've just done on this kickoff deck that I'm very excited about is I'm actually having that conversation right at the very beginning. How will we, and let me even take a step back. It's part of that change management discussion. One of the things that I talk about, because I need this information to successfully do the work that we're going to do. Part of our services include, we create change management content. We put together a deck. We'll present it to every single doctor and team with all the reasons why, along with kind of the basics of the plan, so that we can get early buy-in, talk to the doctor, make sure we're hearing, hey, we're going to have to be careful. I've had Susie working with me for 40 years, and she tells me every day she hates computers, right? Like, we want to hear all that well in advance of when we're talking about penciling in a schedule. But to prepare for that, what I've done then at the early stage, like literally at this kickoff meeting with the client, would be, okay, let's talk about, are you going to offer, it's one thing to standardize onto cloud-based. Are you going to offer additional support services? Like once we roll this out, are you going to take maybe insurance, I don't want to say not verification, because I think that generally should be done automated and at the office level, but insurance payment posting or sending off statements or just marketing, for example, or fee schedule, like all of these extracurricular things that offices have to do on their own. Are you going to offer some of those to them once you have this system in place? If you are, now that's a benefit to the offices and a reason they would want to do this that frankly doesn't have anything to do with the specific software, but it's all about the why. Next, I talk about, tell me about your numbers. Are you seeing large AR? Are you seeing problems with getting schedules filled? Like, what are the actual data that are driving you to this? That's kind of the second piece. Again, office specific. And then thirdly, I'm also asking in today's environment, if you have owner equity doctors, do they understand that this will drive valuation? And if so, that is not a conversation for me to have at the office team level, right? But that is also driving a whole separate conversation that usually my multi-location groups and their investment partners, they can be having with the doctors alone at their next doctor dinner or phone call. So we have multiple layers of like really setting the stage for that. But the last question I'll ask in that kickoff is, let's talk about what happens if Dr. So-and-so says, I'm just not going to do it. How do we feel about that? What would you do? So now to actually answer your question, I am seeing that a couple of layers of this will work. Step one is early on, like hearing it about valuation and hearing that at the executive level, talking in advance about why are we doing this, what's happening, and having them have some input, kind of like what we talked about, like this evolution. Tell me what you think. What are you concerned about? Who do we need to work with? Like, what does that really look like? But even then, like they may then get closer to it and just say, I don't want to do it. You've changed enough, right? If you've relatively recently affiliated, you've already changed my bank and you've already changed maybe some supplies that I like, and I have to use your lab. Like it just feels like a lot of change. So it's not even that they're against the software change. They're just against any change. So the other part of that then is, okay, can they go at the end? Can we put them towards the end of the line? Can they then start to hear successes from other doctors and other groups? Can we then put our arms together from the consulting side with the operations leadership, with our, maybe even the business development, director over at the multi-location group, because they are the ones that probably have known that doctor the longest. How can we then continue the conversation, but not make it forced? And then they can see when they're maybe not necessarily under the gun, here's how this has been working. And we can kind of continuously show the success from other practices going live. And I think just having a little bit of grace and just spending a little more time. I also, I'm actually working on a quote right now for another group that wants to work with me, which is exciting. But I'm talking with them about, this is actually a strategic partnership. Like this is not a transactional kind of work that like, you're going to pay me and I'm going to do these 6, ticky-tacky things. Like we are going to organically talk about what are the challenges that come up. How would we solve them? And that's where it's nice to work with a consultant who's been doing this for 9 years and has a team. And we've been in dozens of offices, right? So we can say, well, when we ran into this in another group, here's what we tried, or here's some content that we created that maybe we could massage and tweak specifically and customize for you. So those are some of the ideas and things. I hope those sound familiar to you. I bet you've lived a lot of that, Mike.
Yeah, I like all of those ideas and all of those concepts. It really is the notion of creating aligned incentives where everybody is on the same page, understanding the benefit that they receive from the practice level to the doctor to the corporate level. It's certainly beneficial if there is doctor ownership in the practice and maybe the top co of the DSO as well, because then you get in theory, the champion within each practice that will help to drive and navigate that change management as you're walking through it. Now, you've talked about some SOPs and processes and centralized services. One of the challenges that I think a lot of groups face when they move into a standardized solution, let's just say it's Mike's DSO, and I've got 40 offices, and I'm in a fragmented system, and there's 6 different practice management solutions. I've got everything, you name it, Eaglesoft, Dentrix, Open Dental. When you're operating in that fashion, there's no like Mike's dental DSO way, because you can't really create the way, because it has to be different with every system, with every office. And I think one of the biggest challenges that groups face when they start to standardize is they recognize there's an opportunity to create the Mike's dental DSO way, but have no idea actually how to go about doing that and what it should look like. And it's kind of scary. Is that something that you help them think through so that they know how they can get consistent operating within each practice and region and otherwise?
This is the question I hoped you would ask me. And I was already trying to think, like, how am I going to get Mike to ask me this question?
You did it. You succeeded. You got me to ask it. I think you just thought it, and then it popped in my head, and there you have it.
Check mark. Be careful
Check
what else
mark.
I put in. Be careful what else I put in your brain next, right?
All right. No problem.
No, I'm so excited about this piece because no one changes software for fun. No one does it. It's so much work. So if you're going to do it, then this is why I think consulting makes a lot of sense, and maybe biased, right? But what I'm seeing is you can, because I've seen this for years, you can switch software and not standardize. You can have the exact same software. You can even have multi-clinic software in every location, and everybody uses it differently. And you didn't actually get consistent data. You can't still run consolidated reports. You don't have standardized processes. You don't have any documentation. You have no way to support your regional managers. So I've seen it done, but done in a way that, like, yes, we switched software, but we didn't accomplish the business outcome we were shooting for at the beginning. And that is 100% why I think it makes sense to work with a consultant. So, how do you do that then? The way that works is the way that we start. We start with an assessment. Help me understand what's current state, what's desired state, where do you want to go? What are you shooting for? And that's desired state, working with every department. I want to hear that not just from the executive leadership team, but I want to hear marketing, finance. What kind of nightmare is doctor's comp right now? And where do you daydream for it to be? What's going on with operations? Are you all over the place and you're struggling here, there, and the other? What kind of analytics are you getting? How many hours does it take you every month to do all the manipulation of getting your numbers so you even know what does net production look like across the board? All those pieces. But anyway, so then we can benchmark that against what are best practices in the software. Because the other fun thing is when I can say, guess what I can automate for you? They're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that was possible. So it's kind of that combination of like, what are they really driving towards? What are they looking for? And then on my side, like, guess what else we can do with this system? And then we can agree to, all right, if this is what you want, now here's how I take a step back then and make recommendations. Here are all the findings. And I can say, like, this is going to be something that's going to be a change for you if this is really where you want to go. But I think that also puts the priority in the right place. We're not changing software to change software. We're making a business decision to evolve our dental group practices to accomplish measurable goals, to achieve organic growth, to achieve, what we're really trying to deliver, improved standard of care, all this great stuff. And we're doing it by standardizing processes through our software. So yeah, I love that so much. And in fact, side note, I did this well enough with a client. It was a 4-location group that said, we need to streamline our revenue cycle. I wrote it all. I went in, evaluated current state, found some things, because the other part that can happen, and this is where I think a consultant, again, makes so much sense, because some things, they don't have anything to do with software. It's decisions or comments that an owner doctor might have made that the team listened to and has been following for the last 5 years, that they have built these massive systems around. So for example, this group, the doctor at one point made a comment about, we should charge for missed appointments, but we shouldn't charge like on the statement unless this special circumstance, and we shouldn't charge the first one, but the second one. So imagine you're the revenue cycle lead. What she had done, this is software. It doesn't matter what software you've got. How are you going to now have a charge for that patient for a missed appointment, but not send a statement for the first one, but only for the second one. So when I go back, and that was just one of the findings that I discovered when we were going through this whole, assessment. Oh, the other part, she was reviewing every single individual patient ledger before she sent out a statement. And side note, the owner of this 4-location group said, Jill, I've already got my eye on 2 more offices. I can't grow. I can't add these offices because my revenue cycle lead, who's worked for me for 10 years, said if I do that, she has to hire 3 more people for the insurance team. And he's like, I just don't think that makes sense. I'm like, well, let me find that out, right? So again, some of the things that I find they have nothing at all to do with which software is better or this or that. It's the workflow. So that's why working specifically for you, when I can sit down and we can go through it with the team who then knows I'm working for them. I'm not here to criticize. I'm here to kind of put my arm around them and say, let me help you. What are you running into? And then we find something like this. So when I went back and told the doctor, I'm like, so side note, you made this comment and here's what's going on. And this is what she said. He was like, oh my goodness sake. I don't care about that. Like, I think I said that 5 years ago. It doesn't matter to me. I don't want her to spend all this time. So literally with a couple of small tweaks that again, don't have anything to do with software setup or any of that, change things. She now is sending out statements and we've changed the missed appointment fee and all of these things, massively streamlining their business, saving them. Like she saved like 40 hours a month of time. Now she's fine to let him add 2 more locations.
What would you recommend somebody that comes to you? They're like, look, we're thinking about changing software. I obviously have strong opinions about this, but there are nobody should be all things for all people. And there's, I think, opportunities depending on what the group is or the organization. If you're 2 locations and you are running a fantastic business, and that is your desire is just to continue to serve the patients in your community, not to grow more, to have a very great lifestyle, but also be able to provide fantastic dentistry. Like there's solutions that can work fantastic for that may be different than if you have a goal of becoming 10 offices. The same if you're 15 offices and you're like, I want to be 100. Like there's different things for different people in the marketplace. What are some of the things that you would recommend people think about when they're looking to make a determination of which path to go, either practice management, but it could also expand further into just tools in general, because there's many of them out there. How do you think about it? And what are some of the things that you would recommend people to look for?
I appreciate that too, right? It's hard. I have people come to me and be like, all right, Jill, we're friends. Just what do you recommend? Just tell me. And in fact, I do some coaching. I do some coaching on the side just for another friend of mine. And I had a client and he was actually gave me a bad review, side note, because I wouldn't just tell him what to buy. So I am a huge fan. Our team, we are product agnostic because we want you to implement well, but also because I want to work across the entire platform of what is your tech stack. And I know, Mike, that resonates with Planet DDS because you are a big believer of like, choose the tech stack that works for you, but we do have to keep in mind the integration side. And so, so a couple things that I encourage, I start asking questions. And what I think is important is just helping them to think about what is important to them. And that can then drive their decision-making. So just like you said, are you wanting to grow and expand? If you're going to be 2 locations and that's your goal, that's very different than someone that says, I want to get to 10 or 20 or 50. I ask about their model. Are you multi-specialty? Do you have ortho? Do you have perio? Like what's important to you? Like what all and how big do you have? When you ask ortho, well, does that just mean Invisalign? I don't mean just, right? But like if you're doing aligner therapy, that's one thing. If you have classically trained orthodontists that really believe in the new numbering, like that might be another, right? So what's your multi-specialty? And you have to think not just today, where are you headed? So I think I ask about specialty. I ask about payer mix. What does it look like for you? Is it complex? Are you taking HMOs or are you primarily fee for service? And then you're a fantastic marketer. What does that look like? I also ask a lot around RCM with, do you have sort of a desire to have some team members that might support that? What does that look like? But across the board, what I think people don't know, so even if you want to stay really small, what I think is super critical is looking at automation. I just did a workshop last week with Dee Fisher and I, which was a blast. And so she can coach on kind of the overall operations and all of this. And then I get to speak specifically into and had a fantastic group in the room, but I got to dig deep into standardization and automation opportunities. And we talked through there's so much out there with dental software today that you may not know about. And so I think that's the other part. If you're struggling with hiring or you're struggling, I think we're all like, it is not easy to run a dental business these days. Overhead has increased, staffing challenges, all the things that you speak about macroeconomically on this podcast all of the time. And when I get right down to it, I can truly make a difference with the software implementation and knowing what's available. And then again, setting that up well. I think the other part of it that I think is so critical is not just rolling out one extra piece of it. So I'm a huge fan of text to pay. Like, I believe that at this point, we should be sending out digital messages, not paper. And I believe that both for the consumer side, because I don't want you to try and send me paper, especially when I have a little bit of a digital nomad lifestyle going on right now. And good luck catching me.
That should be table stakes at this point, right? I mean, everyone should just be doing that. That is meeting the consumer's expectations as well and meeting your patient's expectations.
Absolutely. But what you find is the decisions around getting that done, they have implications around your entire financial policy. So that's where, again, I think having someone that can really speak to this is bigger than just thinking on the technology side. This is, hey, now that we could do a saved card on file, do you want to try a run at being a little bit Netflixy and saying, hey, maybe what we'll do is we'll improve and change our financial policy and talk to our patients about, hey, if there's a fee of less than $25 after insurance, we're just going to charge your card and you sign off. And I'm also seeing sometimes credit card disputes, and how will we handle those? Like, it impacts the feeling and the practice and the style and the model because of the technology. But until you actually know what is the technology, and then you take a step back and think about how could that impact what I'm actually doing and the experience that I'm providing to my patients and to my team, there may be some other things to consider that you didn't even know about.
Do you have clients that ask you about costs and about what they should be investing in technology and what that should look like? The question comes from a perception that I've built over the past maybe 5 years of there being a general belief in many dental organizations where they're thinking very much about the bottom line and not as much about opportunities to increase top line, or thinking as much about the operational efficiency that can be gained, or the fact that with automation, you're actually should not be comparing an apples to apples cost of current solution, but you should be comparing what your reduction in labor cost could be, along with what your increase in production could be, countered by what the actual cost that hits your bottom line is. But do you help people kind of think through the investment part of the project as well? Or do you normally come in after a decision has been made and help to do the execution of the implementation at that point?
At this point, because I'm pretty early stage, right? 2.5 years into doing this, I'm mostly coming in after somebody says, hey, we've decided we want to make a move to Denticon. I've heard about you. I wonder if we could have a conversation. I'm excited about, getting some help because I'm looking around and we can use a hand. I think to your first part of the question, I don't know that I'm seeing that yet, but I think it's really a hard measure. My experience is software is expensive and everyone wants a subscription. In fact, even as a small business owner, I'm getting ready to switch to Microsoft, and I really just want to throw up on my shoes because I can spend a third of the money on Google, but I'm going to move to Microsoft because most of our clients also are Microsoft shops. I can build out SharePoint content for them and make it easier on my team to deliver kind of a seamless execution of here's the SOP, like some basic stuff, right? But it's expensive and anyhow. So software is expensive. So how do you then evaluate that? In general, I don't think we dentistry, we're not great at the SOP or the KPIs on that yet. And so one of the things I'm working really hard on is because this is such a big project, because it is expensive and time intensive and disruptive and can be just all the negative things that I'm saying about the work that I do. Because all of that can be so difficult, what I'm really trying to do at the outset with my clients is to talk through, let's talk about current state. I know right now, like just from some of the clients I worked with, it takes them 2 full days at an executive level to run doctors' compensation because we're now, and that's the time at the executive level. That has nothing to say about at the end of every single day, every office manager across the organization is running garbage reports. I say garbage because I hate this for my team so much because I was an office manager and I had a team that had to work. But I've been in offices where the last 40 minutes of an office manager day is spent running end of day reports. They're battling through the deposit slip. They're getting all their net production numbers. They're having to fill out pieces of paper by hand because they couldn't figure out how else to do that. And then they're scanning it in. They're answering email questions. Like, it is unbelievable. And so comparing that with, I can run a report just like this at any moment to see what is net production, net collection by provider, all the procedures. Like, how do you quantify that? And so I'm really trying to do for my clients, helping them to see, because there's going to be a day, especially my executives, they're going to have to turn back to their investment partner or my doctor owned groups. They're going to deal with a doctor that says, I can't believe that we're doing this. And do you realize that my office manager who's been with me 40 years, she's talking about quitting because this is so painful. We can't only put so much lipstick, right, on pigs. This is hard. And it may be time for someone who's been doing this for 40 years. They may be like, this may be the right time. And we hate that. We don't want to feel like the trigger for that piece. But we also then need to recognize there is a bigger goal at play, but it is hard. So I'm really working hard. And some things, Mike, they come up and you don't know. I have a story where one of my team implemented a software. It was just a small 3-location group. And there's a very specific workflow that you had to follow to apply the charges in a particular way so they would show up on the end of day and the end of month report for collections. And it was easy step to miss. And so it got missed. My team member at the end of the month running again, because that's one of the things that we are doing. We are helping you with quality control. We say we can help you define what a successful go live look like. Go live and just using the software, that's not success. We'll define the very specifics and we'll help monitor to make sure what does that look like. And it looks like, of course, is all the things signed clinical notes. It looks like processing claims. It looks like paying our doctors the right amount and on time. So she runs this end of month report for collections and we're missing $100,000. Like, she knows, she's been working with this team well enough. She knows these numbers. She's been monitoring and seeing it. And she's like, what is going on? She finds the problem. No one else found it. She finds it. Discovers root cause, that they were missing some specific checkmark box on each of these situations. And this was a surgeon, so this is big money. And finds the problem, fixes it, goes back because the team was trained, but they're trained on 100 things. Goes back, updates, makes sure the SOP, retrains the team, fixes the reports, all the things. Turns out also, this is an owner equity doctor. That would have been a $30,000 impact to his compensation. And what do you think happens when you don't pay an extra 30 grand in a month to one of your surgeons? Think about the escalation. So now, like, you want to talk about what's the value of getting this right? What's the value of really making this investment so that you can support this? I can't resist. I have one other story, and then I know we're probably getting close to time. I have another team member led a project for a group in Florida right in the middle of all those 3 stupid hurricanes. We were going to go, I say we, because it was, my company too, but we were going to go live with the first of the group. And it was supposed to go live right when Milton hit. So they're like, all right, we're going to close the practice logically. In fact, my team member is supposed to fly down and she's like, do you think I should go? I'm like, absolutely do not get on an airplane to go to Florida. Not with Milton like coming at us. So it turns out that this pilot office was actually closed for 2.5 weeks. No, they had zero power, no internet, nothing. Thankfully, we went ahead and went live. Like the software was already planned to go live. We already had the conversion in play. That meant on a cloud-based system, they had all the patient data. So she remotely in Ohio actually did all the software setup, probably more than she really signed up for, because all those team members down there, they're worried about their own home, their own internet, their own power, what's going on with their life, right? So that was such a huge opportunity that they also, that group, they had multiple other kind of brands and things, and they had some other software packages as well. They were able to spin up a call center. So her team, she was in constant communication, helping them through a hurricane. They went live 2.5 weeks later, like seamlessly, no big deal, because by then the team had already been deep into texting with patients, scheduling his patients 4 different times, all those things. So like, I don't know, like I'm totally with you on software is expensive and how do you get the ROI on numbers? But what I see, there's always something that seems to come up, and having someone that can help you through it, but also really recognizing what is the benefit of having that available. Those are the numbers and those are the stories that really matter. If they had just plain had a server-based system still there, who knows who's going to go into the practice and try and rescue that server and hope it's still okay? All of those pieces, much less there's no communication with patients. Anyway, I think it seems like you're almost hiding, like, oh, but I want to know exactly the math, especially as we start moving to investor decision makers. So it's hard to tell that, but those are real stories. That is the real life of managing dental practices and the decisions that we make. So I think it's incredibly valuable. It can be hard to measure.
Well, last question. You've been in the dental industry for many, many years now. You pull out your crystal ball and think about the next, 12 months or so. What are you most excited for? It could be a new technology. It could be some trend that you're seeing. Just, when you think about the future of dentistry, what gets you excited?
The next 12 months, what we are going to see is so much more automation with revenue cycle. I am really excited about that. My teams are dying on the vine, right? Like they are really struggling, and revenue cycle is ugly. So I'm seeing that people are working really hard to take care of their patients. And then frankly, they're not being paid for it because revenue cycle isn't getting done. RAR in dentistry is unbelievable. Day sales outstanding. Insurance is one animal, and you can get some support for that. But all the patient balances, they're always worse. In every group I work with, 2/3 of the outstanding money over 90 days is always patient-based. It just is. So anyway, all of that to be said, that I am really excited about some of the things that I'm seeing coming through on automation, whether it's the patient balance side, they'll be able to set up automated communication so that I can set it and forget it. Nobody wants to send out statements. If I can just set it and design the program and let it do that, I love that. And then the money will just come in. Secondarily, I'm really excited about a lot of the conversation I'm seeing in the industry. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting there. Not just insurance verification, but then building out the coverage table automatically. It's right now, everybody talks about insurance verification. I'm not even excited about that. I'm excited because then once I have this fantastic breakdown, however it comes to me, now I still have to hand it over to somebody at the office level or the support level for 30 minutes or 20 minutes to put in all the ticky-tacky things. And they get interrupted. It's just a pain in the neck. So I'm really excited about when that becomes automated, because again, now I don't think anybody comes home at the end of the day and says, guess what, hon, I had a great day. I entered 10 different, coverage tables into our dental software. Like, but I think if those people instead get to then sit down, and this is work that I used to do 100 years ago that I loved, but like sit down and talk to people. I know you have a expensive dental treatment plan. Let's talk about how it's going to impact your smile and your function and the food that you can eat and the job that you're going to get and the girl you're going to flirt with and all the fun things, right? Like when you actually get to do that work, that's dinner table conversation, and that's more meaningful work. So in an industry where we really want to keep attracting the most fantastic people to help us and really evolve health, that's the work we want to do. So I'm excited to automate more work, to give our teams more time, and then to refocus them on the part of the job that frankly is the most fun and the most meaningful.
How can people find you?
Oh, come hunt me down. I am, check out my website. It's optimizedent.com. And I am magically Jill at optimizedent.com. Hunt me down on LinkedIn. And side note, I love to talk about technology. So even if you're like, oh, I should only call her if I'm going to hire her and she won't want to talk to me, like I love to talk about tech. So feel free, reach out, email me, text me, message me, all of the fun things. If it's something even you just want to have a conversation, because like you said, I've been around for a while and I really enjoy helping groups get their arms around what is going on with technology and maybe giving them some ideas about how they could kind of get started to make some real advantages in their group.
Well, this has been fun. Thank you so much for joining, Jill. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike. It was a blast. Thanks for inviting me.
The Dental Economist Show is brought to you by Planet DDS, home of Dental OS. To find out more about how cloud-based dental software by Planet DDS helps unleash dentists and their staff to focus on patient care, visit www.planetdds.com. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes by following wherever you listen to podcasts. And thank you for listening.